Hello, and thank you for joining us for another session of Dedication. Fans, remember the Bay City Rollers, the only Bay City Rollers themed podcast in the world. Hosted by Bay City Rollers fan events, and I'm Suze, and co-hosting is Laura. Hello, Laura.
Hey, Suze, great to talk to you.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. We've had a busy day again today at Bay City Roller fan events.
There's a lot to do. A year out.
Oh, a lot to do, and we're on it, and things are going well, and it's exciting, and I'm loving the excitement of everyone and just the response we're getting. It just seems to be growing and growing and growing. And it's been a long time since we had a fan event, so we all want to
Definitely.
see each other again.
Yeah, me too.
It's just so much fun. But anyway, in addition to all the fun we're having with Tartan Day Parade, we did a podcast today. And Laura, I just love how the secular nature of our podcasts and how happenstance brings guests to us.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely it's a small world comes to mind
Hmm.
because you never know. Sometimes our inspiration, like we know exactly who we want to get, and other times it just falls into your lap.
And this kind of happened. I was having lunch with a friend of mine in Asbury Park a few weeks ago, and we were talking, and we're music lovers, and we were talking music, and the podcast came up, and you know, they said, "Wait, we know someone," and then it just kind of happened, and they brought this person to us. And today, we spoke with Brian Bannon, and he's, like I said, a mutual friend of a mutual friend, and he's our next guest. He's a bit of a renaissance man in the music industry and has worked as a stage technician, a studio engineer, recording and mixing engineer, both pre-production and album production. He worked at live mixing as a live mixing engineer, front of house monitors with the likes of people like Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, Little Steven, Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze, the Rascals, the Temptations, Four Tops, the Marshall Tucker Band, Warren Zevon, Davy Johansen, also known as Buster Poindexter, Gary U.S. Bonds, Alexa Ray Joel, Sly Stallone, Gerald Levert, George Clinton, Bootsy Collins, woohoo! And Bernie Worrell of Parliament and Funkadelic, just to drop a few names there.
Just a couple.
That's a lot. I had to catch my breath. And he sat down with us and told us about the time that he worked with the Rollers. He worked with them during the Duncan era while they were recording their highly acclaimed album Ricochet, also known as the Brown Bag album. This was, of course, after the band had a lineup change, name change, and were really going for a big sound change. They were exploring their own style of music, possibly for the first time with Elevator and Vox, and then finally with Ricochet. So we had a chance to talk with Brian today about his experience with that. So we're going to let everyone else hear that. What do you think, Laura?
I can't wait for people to hear his stories. They were wonderful.
Okay, so we're just going to patch that in because it was recorded earlier, and away we go. Okay?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Well, thank you, first of all, for agreeing to do this. And I'm
I'm
Suze. I'm
Laura.
from
I'm from
Philadelphia.
Plymouth, Massachusetts.
All right, we're all connected here. Yeah,
Yeah.
no
Very
problem.
nice to meet you. We're all connected. So how did it come about that you'd be
Well,
working with the
it was a
Rollers?
funny bit of circumstance. They had were coming off of actually a hiatus. They had all their legal problems and things, and they got picked up by a management company. It was David Sonnenberg management company. Once they got a lot of their stuff sorted out, and it looked like they were going to be able to record and go back and play. They were picked up in the States by David Sonnenberg. I had a connection to that David Sonnenberg's productions and management through Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, a New Jersey-based band.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
and I had
Oh, yeah.
friends. A friend of mine was the sound man for the Jukes, and a friend of mine Steve Becker was the drummer for the Jukes, and I would go to shows and that because we worked the New Jersey club scene for a long time before that. And if you graduated and you got the tour, that was Jukes were one of the places where you could go. And so I would go to Juke shows and do things, but they had no real place for me. Everybody, all the jobs were taken and everything was going, but I had a relationship with them. So when they picked up the Rollers and
Right.
they knew that they were going to need some help getting stuff together and getting it reorganized, I was one of the ones they considered for a couple different reasons. Besides the fact that I, understood music and understood, music equipment and bands and stuff like that. I also was working in a small demo recording studio in North Jersey, which was it was called All Star Sound Studios, and it was owned by the drummer Steve Becker, drummer from the Asbury Jukes, and Jay Vicari, the soundman from Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. And then other than them, it was just me. So it was the three of us that did this recording studio. And the management company said this would be a great place to work out the songs and get all the kinks roughed out of the way before they went into the studio to actually go record what later became Ricochet.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So, okay. So were you aware of their previous success of the boy bands
Sure.
when you came on board, or did you
Sure.
have to kind of, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, you probably
exactly. I
couldn't
mean, it
really
would be
think
kind of
that.
hard
Yeah.
not to. As a music lover, anybody listened to the radio, you heard the Bay City Rollers. There was no question about that.
Yeah.
I think that was a little before we actually called them boy bands, though.
Mhm.
they, they were
That
the
is
boy
very
band
true.
before
That
there
is
was
very
boy
true.
bands. But
Very
yeah, I
true.
was, yeah,
They are the
absolutely.
original boy band,
So I was
probably.
aware. There's no
I mean,
question
you
that I
wouldn't
was
call the
aware.
Beatles that.
It actually kind of struck me because they were saying, "Hey, listen, we have, we could really use you. We just, signed the Bay City Rollers. Would you like to work with the Bay City Rollers?" And to me, that was like, mind blowing. It was out of the blue. So I was like, "Sure,
Sure.
absolutely, let's do it."
Now, by this time, I mean, they had released 2 albums before Ricochet, Elevator, which was critically acclaimed but poorly received commercially, and then another album, Vox, that I think was only released in Germany and Japan. So it kind of looked like, they were going through like an image change, a name change. They were trying to be seen as, rockers as opposed to a boy band. Were you aware of that they were involved in that kind of a transition? And if you were, what kind of challenges did you think that the
Well,
band were facing, if any,
sure.
with that
Well,
baggage,
there's
if
a
you know
lot of
what I mean?
expectations whenever, I mean, they were on TV a lot and they had pop hits and they were like a pop band. And of course, you
Mm,
can't escape the plaid and
Mm.
that. So whenever that's the image that you have, um, you kind of need to grow up a little bit at certain times. And they were looking to grow up, I believe. Now, I had no idea that was
sure.
a specific goal or what they were planning on doing until we actually in the studio. And it was at that point they had already been settled in the house in South Orange Maplewood area, and they had come down. They had come down to the recording
Right.
studio the first day. Now the recording studio was right on the East Orange Bloomfield border, probably about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes at the most away from the house. And so that very first day,
Oh,
when we got their equipment in and got the introductions out of the way, and they got a chance to start playing, I started listening, and I'm saying, this doesn't sound like Saturday night. Um, yeah, so
no, no, indeed. What were your first impressions of the sound that you were
uh,
hearing? Were you
yeah,
like, wow,
absolutely. I mean, from the
surprised,
exposure
or?
that I had from the band before, which again is basically just, top 40 radio, and without actually ever working with them, my first
Hmm.
impression was they were much better musicians than I expected them to be.
Interesting. Okay.
With
Mm,
that, you never know, you know, can people play? Can they not play? Or how much of it was done in the studio?
sure.
Was it all done by them? Was it done with other musicians? And I was absolutely thought it was awesome because each one of them played multiple instruments. They all were very, very good with their instruments, as a matter of fact. So that was the first thing that struck me. And then the actual complexity of the music they were writing was far from the basic, 3 or 4 chord pop hits that I had heard earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
No question
it was
about it.
serious. Did you have a sense of like who maybe was taking on the leader role? I mean, Duncan was the lead singer and he was the frontman, but what was the dynamic with them? Like who kind of was like leading the art,
Um,
I guess, for lack of a better word?
well, a lot of it actually was very well spread across the board as far as how things went. Like there was no like we walked in the studio and somebody, one of them said, "All right, this is what we're doing and this is how it's going." It was all as a band, and clearly a lot of Duncan's influences there. Some of the stuff that he had done from his previous band, Rabbit, and some of the fact that he was the going to be handling the lead vocals. There's still songs for Eric and there's still songs for Woody singing and that. But Duncan was going to be handling the mainstay of the singing, and he's an accomplished guitar player as well. So that clearly came through in the writing. But I wouldn't say that made anybody the leader of the band. In fact, I think it was pretty well balanced.
So they were actually true collaborators.
And then there was songs from multiple writers on there being done.
And were the songs already in the can, or was there still reworks going on when you got into the studio?
They probably, and I knew you were going to ask me this, and I can't think of any of them for the life of me.
Sorry.
But there probably were almost as many songs that didn't make the record as far as the ones that made the record.
So there could have been another record.
That's true with any record. You always try a whole bunch of things to see what things sound like and how they're working, and did the song develop correctly? Does the song fit with the other songs? There's a lot of considerations you put together. So there was a number of songs that were put out there, and before it settled into what was actually going to be on Ricochet.
Do you know whose decision it was to release Ricochet as the Brown Bag album? It was getting airplay, and I know in college radio and other stations, and people were like, "Wow, who is this?" They were really excited about it. And then when they found out who it was, it kind of died a death. Like,
I know,
it never made sense to me.
It seems kind of strange because if you like it, you like it, right? That's the way it should be.
Right.
I think it's a smart move.
Exactly.
Specifically, whose particular idea it was, I can't really say. That was the stuff about the managerial things and how things were released and the press and the public. I had nothing to do with any of that end of it. I thought it was really smart because when you go into it with a bunch of stereotypes about what a band is, quote unquote, is or is supposed to sound like, you'd be predisposed right off the bat. You might not even get anybody to listen because they've already pigeonholed them as, oh, that's that pop bubblegum band from the 70s, And now this is clearly not pop and bubblegum. And so I think that it made a lot of sense to be able to do that. But I was a little disappointed as well that it couldn't have been accepted for the music for what it was.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it was genius to release it that way. It's just unfortunate. It should have had the opposite effect once they found out who it was.
But it was a good idea.
It was a great idea. And what was the plan with CBS? Did they think that they could do something with them, or was it kind of like a one and done deal?
I really don't. I don't know what contracts were, or I don't know what management's deal was with this. I just knew that they were going to take a chance. David Sonnenberg and his management team had a proven record. I mean, at that time, he was handling things like Meatloaf was one of his big things, and that had just come out like 2 or 3 years before that. Mm-hmm. He managed Southside Johnny, Suzanne Fellini. There was a number of them. I can't recall all of them. His office is in New York. We would go in and plan. We planned the tour there and what was going to happen there and who was going to go and all that. So, I mean, they were actively involved, but specifically, what was the deal with the record company? I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah, and if the record would have
Yeah,
skyrocketed,
oh,
well, there
I'm
probably
sure
would
of
have been a
that.
different
That's
answer to that
outright. Yeah.
question anyway, right? Yeah, yeah, there would have been some renegotiations for sure. Now, I know you listen to Joyce's podcast, and we love that because that was that was our first one, and it was so much fun. Years later, Joyce and I happened to be in that area. We were at the Clearwater Music Festival, the Pete Seeger one, and she said, we're near Maplewood. Do you want to drive by the house? I'm like, oh my God, that would be so much fun. So we
Oh my
roll up and there's an
goodness.
open house. What are the odds? So we
Absolutely.
pretended we
Why
were
wouldn't you?
prospective
That's
buyers
perfect.
and we went in there. So now, I mean, and I almost made it through the whole thing without blowing our cover, but I was excited. So the basement, was that set up like an in-home studio? Because it looked like in some of the pictures
Well,
and
yeah,
also when we were in
there
that
was always
space.
instruments and things around, and that's where you could go work things out. Most of that stuff got done in at All Star Sound, though. But there was clearly a space there
Yeah.
at the house to be able to be creative and bang around and make some noise a little bit there too. In a neighborhood that's not used to a lot of noise, by the way. There's definitely quiet. It was definitely a quiet
Oh, yeah.
neighborhood.
Beautiful. I mean, absolutely beautiful house. But when I did blow the cover because I just couldn't resist asking questions, she did say that there was a rock band that lived there and were true rock stars and had wild parties, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And we know that, there was a revolving door with just fans and women. And hey, that gives them street cred to me as real rockers. Go for it. How how in the world did the fans find out where the frig they lived and the phone
Well,
number? That phone rang nonstop.
somebody will always find it out. There's no question about it. But the boys like to go out. There's no question about that. So I think once they settled in, they went
Yeah.
and checked out and saw where they were and what was going on and where to go out. And I'm sure that they had a lot to do with people knowing where they were locally, at least. I don't think it was put out there and announced. But I mean, if they were to go,
Yeah.
there was two. I can't think of the name of the one that was more of like the local bar that they used to go to. I don't remember that. And another one was a Hula Hands, and that one was in West
Yeah.
Orange.
Hula hands.
Yeah,
Although
it was
back
an
in the
early, but
day,
it was
that
not
was
like
the
Hula
John.
Hands. No, it was large. It was a very big one.
Yeah.
It was ideally situated because it was literally you had to pass it to go to the recording studio.
Oh,
And so it was about a half a mile from the
that's
recording
convenient.
studio. It was easy to go either on your way or on the way back or both for that matter. Yeah, for that matter. Yeah.
Depending on what the mood was, right? Yeah, uh, Joyce was invited to go out with them, and she declined. And she wanted to know, where
Well,
was I invited to
we'll say
go?
that.
So
And then
hula hands it
there was a
is. I
local
like
bar,
that.
like a little Irish pub, I think. And I'm trying to remember what the name of it was and where it was. But I believe it was, I believe it was in South Orange. And it wasn't far from like the Seton Hall University campus because that's in South Orange. And it was just like a
Mm.
little Irish pub, and they would like to go there as well. But the Hula Hands was key because it was literally right down the street.
Oh, yeah, very convenient. Convenient, which is always good. Um, so the house in Maplewood,
Oh
did
no,
you did
no,
you live there,
I
or
was there
were you
quite a
just
bit, but
there
I
just
didn't
sometimes?
live
Or
there. I live, and I am right now where I grew up in northern New Jersey. I still am living in northern New Jersey right now. Right now, as I talk to
but
you,
that's
I
not
am
that close.
probably about I don't know 10 to 15 minutes away from that house right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and where
Was that right?
Yeah,
I
right.
wonder.
I'm
I
sure
wonder
they did.
if they got a
But
sale.
yeah,
I'm
no,
sure they did.
where I live, I live probably about 15 minutes from the recording studio. They were about 10 minutes from the recording studio, just in a little different direction. So I mean, it's right. It's all very close. And the recording studio. No,
So
no,
you're
I
not in the
worked with them, but
Asbury area
I was
anymore.
always from North Jersey. I
Yeah,
was always closer to Manhattan than I
gotcha.
am to the shore. Manhattan is about 30 minutes. The shore is about an hour for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, do you have any fun stories you want to share about hanging out the house,
I
like
do
maybe
recall
Gerald the
Gerald the Ghost,
ghost?
but I can't. Those stories were mainly theirs. They weren't like I had no. I'd never had no. I never saw or had any
So
ghost
you never
stories
saw Gerald.
myself. They would have ghost stories. There's no question about it. So I do
That's
recall. I do
funny.
recall them talking about that and saying that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, this place has got a ghost and this and that. But I thought it had to do more with scotch than it did have to do with actual ghosts.
Well, and it was Alan that
There,
talked quite a bit about
yeah.
Gerald the ghost.
And
Yeah,
right off the bat,
it
that
was.
says something
So you know
because
what I
Alan
really
was
want
not
to.
very talkative at all. Everybody in the band, he was probably the brother. Alan and Derek were probably the most quiet, without question.
Well, I think Gerald maybe freaked him out a little bit. I'm not sure. You know what I really want to ask about, and it's just a weird fascination for me personally, the Turtle Brook Hotel. Like we know Eric would go there like on the reg. Like why? I mean, maybe for the obvious reasons of privacy if he's with a lady or
No,
something,
it's simpler,
but
much
it
simpler
couldn't have
than
just
that.
been that,
It
was
was
it?
around it was literally. I mentioned that
Oh,
this
okay.
Houlihan was like a half a mile from the recording studio. Well, the Turtle Brook Inn was a quarter of a mile from the
Yeah.
Houlihan's. So literally, the Turtle Brook Inn was kind of like around the corner and less than a mile away from the recording studio, and literally 2 blocks away from the Houlihan's. So it was a kind of thing where if you didn't want to go all the way back to the house, or if it was not that it was far, or if you just wanted some private time, or maybe his parts weren't what were
Yeah.
being worked on in the studio that day or that at that time, and they were going to need him in a little while, or he finished, and that it was literally right around the corner. So that it was a lot of it had to do with the convenience of the location. So the recording studio now, and I want to give a distinction between when I recording studio because there's 2 studios. The one studio that I worked in was in East Orange, and that was like 15 minutes away. The studio that they actually recorded the album in was the
Okay.
House of Music in West Orange, and that one, very famous recording studio. Lots of big stars came through there. I mean, like Carole King and Styx and Kool and the Gang and Meatloaf
Wow.
and Southside
Mm.
Johnny. Many of them recorded in that studio. In Pleasant Valley Way, and that's the song. Another Pleasant Valley Sunday came out
Oh,
of that. It was written
That's a
about
great.
this
Yeah.
suburban area in town, and this is when Carole King was at the House of Music, and she wrote that then, and it wound up being on the
Hmm.
Monkees, who might have been the first boy band now that we think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
First boy slash band. I just random. I just watched the behind the music on them the other day because that's all we're doing is watching things now, right? And I never saw it before, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Wow, this is really
No, no
wild what
problems.
happened to
It's
them."
kind of,
Anyway,
quite
I
frankly,
digress.
it's kind
But
of something that would normally come up because if you think about where the stardom and things come from, it's not that much different than what the guys had. It's a similar story.
no, they have, yeah, parallel experiences for sure. They all wanted to be seen as real, real musicians, and the TV aspect of it, and the image and all of that. So yeah, it was definitely, I found it to be very parallel by watching it. Let's see. I would like to know. Okay, what exactly was your role with Ricochet?
So
What were
when
you? What were your responsibilities, and
so when they went
what do
to
we
go
thank
work
you
it all
for?
out, they would come down to the All Star Sound recording, and that's where I worked. So we would spend a lot of times, and at that point they would be working out parts, figuring out what it's going to be, and basically we recorded the album and we did everything right there. But it wasn't for real. This is like to work it all out for what they were going
Hmm.
to do from when they went into the studio. So when they pretty much had it all sorted out, at that point they took the tapes that they recorded at All Star Sound because it was a much smaller studio, much more affordable studio. and they can spend more time and do things without like blowing a
Okay.
whole budget there. And it was literally right down the street. We had a good working relationship with both the House of Music and with the management company. So it made sense for everybody. So that's where my starting with them. So I would be there basically day and night whenever they were booked in. I was an assistant engineer mainly. So I'd make sure that all the gear was right, that the tapes were up on the machines. That Jay, who was the main engineer on the whole thing, would be ready to go. The guys would be ready to go. We needed to switch up. I jump out into the studio, switch up the microphones, or adjust things, get things together. So I was basically the assistant engineer for all the stuff that we did there. And then they took
Mm-hmm.
the master tapes that we had made and brought them up to the House of Music. Some of the tracks, I believe, were used with some of the things that we recorded, and then they would overdub on top of them. But I think a lot of them they used as a guide, and they started from scratch because that was, like I said, the House of Music, world-class recording studio, world-class people there too. They were wonderful to work with. They haven't been there in quite some time, but they put out a lot of great stuff out of the House of Music, no question about it.
Mm. Did you have any involvement with the making of the videos? There are still girls clutching their pearls over
All
those
that stuff was
videos.
done.
Oh
All that
my,
stuff was
my.
done after the records and everything were taken care of. I had nothing to do with any of that. I wasn't on any of the video shoots. I recall them going out to video shoots and doing things, but well, basically at that point we had shifted gears.
Yeah.
We knew that the record was finished recording and was going to be released, and what it was going to look like and what things were. And so on my end, they had now said, "Would you go out on the road and do this?" Because I had road experience as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
Jay, the sound man, and myself, we said yes, we'd absolutely do it. We completed the crew by adding a good friend, Kevin Buell, to the crew. And me and Kevin were basically the stage crew for the band, and Jay was like the mixing engineer for the band. And we started focusing on that. I mentioned Kevin because unlike me, he managed to stay in the business for quite some time. About, I'd say 5 or 6 years later, he hooked up with this guitar player from Asbury Park, and he's been working with him for 35 years. You've probably heard of him. His name is Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I heard of him. Now, is Kevin the one who connected you with us? Because I have a mutual friend with Kevin,
Yeah,
and then Kevin said, "Oh
it
no,
was
this is
Kevin.
the guy you really want to talk
Kevin
to."
gave me a
Was it
call.
Kevin?
It's funny because
Yeah.
we've been in touch back and forth. We wouldn't do it all the time, but a few times a year we text back and forth, occasional call. So we've been in touch all this time. But recently, Kevin's been
Yeah.
he decided he's going to document a lot of this stuff because he's had one heck of a ride in this crazy music business. And
Oh, I
yeah,
bet.
yeah.
Just that area alone. Yeah, I was
Uh,
at McLuhan's 2 Saturdays ago, and that's when our mutual friend. That's when I brought up the podcast, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah,
you've got to
sure.
talk to these people."
Well,
So
yeah,
it just
all of it.
happened
It's a small
happenstance,
world.
and I
We
love
would
when that
work in the
happens.
clubs. I
Love when that
got
happens.
Kevin from that. We
So,
worked in local bands and club bands, and we worked our way out of it. Obviously, he took the correct turn along the way and went. But we got the reason why we got talking is because Kevin, like I mentioned, was starting to write the stuff down. He wanted to document it for himself and for his family to have, like, this crazy path. So he was unclear. He was unclear on a bunch of the things. So he actually called me up,
absolutely.
and we spent a couple of hours on the phone, revamping a few things, and a bunch of it was the Bay City Roller years,
Oh, I
because
love that.
it was basically the first thing that took us out of like the local club bands into a recording and touring act. That was my first for that, and it was Kevin's first for that as well. So that was a
Yeah.
blast, and that was fun reliving it. And then if we were to go fast forward a little bit, just a couple months
So
after we
we
started talking about it, he says, "Hey, do you mind if I give your number or your email out?" I said, "No, go right ahead. I'd be happy to talk to you guys."
Oh, that's great.
well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. Well, could you tell us more about that tour? I mean, to be honest, I was already,
Me
I
too.
kind of moved on at that point. I think I, either was in high school or, real boyfriends happened and things like that. So I didn't even know about this tour. We probably would have gone,
Sure.
but we do have friends who went to the Peppermint Lounge gig. But
Well,
tell us what that tour
it
looked
wasn't a
like and
huge tour.
like the scope of it.
It was kind of like a mini tour. I think it was roughly, I want to say it was about 5 or 6 weeks on the East Coast. And then where we were debating about whether or not they were going to continue it with a West Coast tour. So we did the Peppermint Lounge and a bunch of other dates. I remember playing, basically from Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, on all up through New England. And we would do dates. And then when
Hmm.
it got really
Hmm.
interesting is that they were saying, I think we're going to add 3 weeks in California. So let's be ready to go and do everything. So we
Oh,
had the truck packed with gear. Kevin came up. Kevin was down from the Asbury Park area. He came up, had his stuff ready to go. I was packing my bags ready to go. And we were basically sitting at Riverside Productions office on the Upper West Side, Riverside Drive, waiting to find out, is it on, is it off, is it on, is it off?
Oh,
And
wow.
literally, we had to know whether, because if it was going to be on, the first show was going to be at the Roxy in West Hollywood, and we had to get out there. So we knew we
you
needed
had to
a
get out
certain
there.
amount of time to get there. So
Yeah,
we were getting down to the crunch time, literally a matter of hours. Like if you don't say yes now, we physically can't get there in time. And they said yes. So me and Kevin
you
were in
can't
front.
do
It
it.
was
Yeah.
August. Me and Kevin were in front of a 24 foot Ryder rent-a-truck that had no air conditioning, and
Mm.
Oh,
we had a
no.
cassette deck that we had
Oh,
wired in, literally, that like somebody pulled out of a car, and we had wires dangling, and we had wired it in just so that we can listen to some music along the way. And we set out from New York City,
yeah.
and basically, except for food and gas, we just drove. Yeah. So along
Kept
the
on
way,
trucking. Wow.
something happened with the truck, and we found out that um, it was broken, and we should have turned it in to Ryder and switched trucks, but that was going to take too long. So what we figured out is if it would last if we never shut it off. So
Oh, my
we
gosh.
went, we drove, and we would stop, we would get gas, and then somebody would have to stay with it because it would be running. And then
Oh, my.
somebody would run to the bathroom, grab sandwiches, come out,
Oh, that's
and then the
so
other guy would go
funny.
and do it and come out. And we did that all the way till we got to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And at that point, we were shot. We had been driving forever, so we got it. We got a hotel room, and I don't know who went first or with not, but
Oh my God.
one of us went in and slept for like 2 or 3 hours and took a shower, and the other one, crashed in the front of the truck that we couldn't shut off, and then we switched so that we would do that,
Oh, my
and we
gosh.
drove it all the way
Wow.
in, and I think we were about 3 or 4 blocks from the Roxy when the truck finally gave up and broke down, and we got there in 2.5 days from New York
Oh,
City,
Wow.
my God.
and they had to pull. It might have been a record. They had to pull another truck up
That might be
behind
a
it and
record.
move the gear from one truck into the
Woo.
other. And we went to like the 3 or 4 blocks to be able to bring it to the Roxy and empty the gear into the Roxy and get ready for the first show. And they towed that other truck out of the way. But that was our adventure going out there. And it was hot. Like I mentioned, it was August, and we went out like Route 40, the southern route. So we were driving through Oklahoma City and Amarillo, Texas, and Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it was hot. I'll tell you that.
That's incredible. That's an incredible story. I love that. That has to go in the
Yeah.
book. All of that. Or the
And then we
movie.
wound up doing about
Do a movie. Let's just do
3
a
weeks in
movie.
California. The Roxy shows were great. We got in the night before, and that's when the truck broke down and everything. We did go to the club, and the Knack was playing there that night, and so we met the guys. We met the guys from the Knack, and we talked with them, and that was
Oh,
fun. And they yeah, they finished up their shows,
Doug,
and
R.I.P.
then
Dougie.
the next we did, it was 2 nights, 2 shows a night, and the Rollers played, and then we wound up playing a bunch of other places along the way. And the tour finished up at Harrah's in Lake
What was,
Tahoe,
Oh my gosh.
and it was a great gig. It was a week
wow,
long gig,
that's a
and
nice
it was
gig.
perfect after all this craziness. So it wasn't the main stage; it was the cabaret, and it
Oh,
was
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
yeah, it was gorgeous, and it was a
That's
rotating
okay.
show.
You had that
So
view.
we would
That's
play.
okay.
The rotation
Oh,
was the
wow.
Rollers, the Elvin Bishop Group, and then the local cabaret show. Each thing played.
Oh,
You
wow.
played a 50-minute set. The curtain closed. 10 minutes to switch it over from one band to the other band. Then the curtain opened. Who did a 50-minute set? The curtain closed. 10 minutes to switch it over. The
Mm.
cabaret show was singing and dancing was there, and that rotation went on. You did 2 rotations a night, so there were 6 shows. The Rollers did 2. Belvin Bishop did 2. And the rest of the time, it was great because there was no
That's
load in, there
incredible.
was no load out, there was no breaking anything down. We literally rolled the equipment off the stage, and then the
Yeah.
rest of the night was spent, uh, me and Kevin trying to keep up with the guys, drinking scotch and enjoying
And
Tahoe, right? And so
enjoying
that was a
Tahoe.
week of that, and then the tour,
Yeah.
and then the tour was over, and at
That
that
sounds like a
point,
nice week, actually.
yeah, after the craziness, right?
Yeah.
And then
You earned that after
we
Absolutely.
that.
drove
You
from
earned
Lake
that after
Tahoe
that
straight back
drive.
to New York City. That was in two and
Now,
a half days as well, and we got the heck out of there, and we just drove straight on through. We figured we did it 3 weeks early, and
yeah. Well, what was the turnout like? I mean, what were the crowds like? Was it
it was
mixed? Was it
mixed.
fans? Was it,
There was definitely a bit of
curiosity?
both. It was mixed.
A bit of
Um,
both?
there was fans. I mean, there was lots of screaming girls pushing their way up front, and they were at
Oh
every
wow.
shows. They wouldn't miss those.
Yeah.
So
We still do that.
there you go.
Present company excluded.
So there was definitely a lot of that. So anybody that figured out what was going on and who it is, they managed to get there and do it. So there was plenty. There was plenty of the same faces at all the shows. You could see from the Roxy. They would make their way to the other venues. I can't remember all the other places. I know there was a couple in San Francisco we played, and somewhere else. But there's some of the, even the Tahoe, there was
Sure.
some people that
And
made it to every show. They would come by and say hello and
That's amazing.
ask if we can have some of the guys come out. And I'm like,
mm,
I told you 3 cities ago, they're not coming out right now. The show's about to go on. So yeah,
yeah, the protector of the realm.
sure.
There's a lot of that still goes on today, actually, believe it or not. They still need protection. Can you tell us a little bit about each member, like your impression
Oh,
of them,
sure.
their talents, what they brought to the table?
I'll start with Woody because Woody and I, our birthdays are 1 day apart. So I'm February
Aw.
24th, and he's February 25th.
Oh,
There you go. So him and
he was my
George
favorite.
Harrison were born on the same day,
There you go.
and he's
That's
he's
right.
the
That's right.
youngest, or I guess he's still the youngest. He's the youngest, and so we were closest in age. I think he's 3 years older than maybe. So when this is all going on, we're young. I think he
Wow.
was 24 and I was like 21,
You're
or
a kid.
he was 23 and
Wow.
I was like 20, something like that.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
amazing.
so yeah, absolutely. But Woody was great. Always a
Babies.
smile, always a smile, never not a smile. Um, Always ready to laugh. Um, Played guitar, played bass, played keyboards, played saxophone. So very, very well rounded. He was one of the ones that definitely go like, wow, play whatever you put in front of him.
Hmm.
Um, Always put a smile on my face. Duncan and Woody were very close. I think that they musically thought a lot the same. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Definitely was a little.
Hmm.
It was a different relationship. Duncan could have a very serious side to him, not in an intellectual way of a serious side. Not
Mm-hmm.
a nothing. Yeah, he pondered
Right.
things a lot.
Artistic.
What does that
Hmm.
mean, or what does this mean, and that. Um,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, Derek and Alan probably the quietest of the bunch. Alan definitely the quiet. Derek was
Yeah.
he was definitely on everything that was going on, understood the business of it.
Mhm.
Kind of like we always made sure the schedule got kept. It was quiet and very considerate. Um, Alan blew me away because he would take a righty bass and just flip it over and play lefty, and that blew my mind because the
Wow, that's awesome.
wrong with being a lefty
Yep.
bass
Yeah, he
bass
did.
player is fine, but they string their guitar for a lefty guitar, and he didn't do that. He took a righty guitar and just turned it upside down,
Mm-hmm.
and that just like.
Nope.
But at the same time, he played regular guitar, and that
Yep.
was strung like a lefty would do it. So it totally freaked me out how that would work, but he did
That's a
it.
talent.
Yeah, because you'd have to you have to rethink the
Yeah.
instruments because yeah, unbelievable. But he
Like a
would
dyslexic
absolutely be
bass
able to
player.
do that. And Eric was great.
Oh, wow.
Eric could really play the guitar. I liked his voice a lot because it had a little bit of a rougher, a little bit of that sandpaper in the tone,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
He would write
Oh, for
differently. He
sure.
would kind of more of a rocker. And that I think that musically, probably thought more like he did than anybody. Um, he had a good sense of humor too, but it didn't always show. Sometimes there was you just saw a serious side. But when it came out, he was a prankster, a jokester too. Um, yeah. But overall,
Oh, I love
the
that.
biggest thing I got
Yeah.
out of it was that they were just actually a joy to be with, even when things were tough. They would always find a lighter side, or it would always be easy, because it's never always all easy. There's conflicts there's differences of opinion, what you want to do. There's circumstances
Yeah.
that pop up that that are not fun or convenient, and you got to deal
Mm-hmm.
with them, like some of these gigs
Right.
and that. So there was tough times, but I've been through a lot of different bands along the way, and these guys took it as light and easy and as professional as any of them that I've ever been around. There's no question about it.
Really nice to hear.
Oh, I love to hear that. Yeah. I mean, you may have already told us your
Well,
favorite memory of your time. Maybe it
there's
was the
definitely the
cross
most things
country
that come
trek,
out of that.
or do you have
Kevin
any
and
other
I
favorite memories?
went from absolutely loving each other to absolutely hating each other to absolutely loving each other just to get through the whole thing. There's only so much time two stinking 20-year-olds in the front of a truck can do, but that
Yeah.
overall trip, especially ending in Tahoe the way it was,
Oh
is
God,
without
yeah.
question the fondest memory of the whole thing. Um, but yeah, I
Mm.
definitely say it was the West Coast trip, um, and it was definitely Lake Tahoe. We had a chance to hang out and relax. They put us up we didn't stay right at the hotel. We actually stayed across the state line in South Lake Tahoe, California. These like ski chalets. They're like basically great apartments. So that was awesome.
Mm.
Yeah, that was definitely it. That was my favorite of the.
Yeah, you earned all that, and it just sounds like it was meant to be, and it all worked out. Okay, so our final question: what do you make of us all these years later, still engaged, still a strong community, and creating
I
events to bring us all together? Still,
in a
like you
lot
say,
of
40 plus
ways,
years later.
something to really appreciate that. I know with the advent of the internet and how everything's going, and there's a website, or there's a podcast, or there's a group, or there's a Facebook group, or something for all of this now. None of that stuff. It was years and years after
Mm.
the band was done, before these things keep out. So the fact that it stayed strong and then
Yeah.
this stuff became available, I think it's really awesome. Why not relive it, live a little youth? But if you get a little too carried away, I think they have medication for that to make sure that you can.
They
There
do.
was a lot.
They
Let me
do.
tell you,
And I
there was
think
a
it's
lot of
Scotch. It
scotch,
might be
and there
Scotch.
was a lot of Marlboros, and regular Marlboros weren't enough. They went to 100s because they just three drags that everybody could get out of them. Um,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. But
Yeah, you needed 3 or 4 more puffs.
I after that, I don't know that I drank brown liquor after that. I stayed with clear stuff. Yeah. The
Oh,
scotch
yeah.
definitely, and yeah,
Once you
they
puke it up, you're
killed
done.
me. There's no question about it.
Done forever. Oh, dear. Well, Brian, thank you so much. You'll have to come find
No
us at a
problem. It
show or
was
an
my
event one
pleasure to
day and see
talk to
how we
you
all turned out.
about. I know you can't see it, but hopefully you can hear it in my voice. There's been a smile on my face this whole time.
Oh,
It was
thank
great to
you.
relive. It was great to relive a lot of the stuff.
We're smiling
It
right
was
with
a fun
you.
time and fun time in my life. It was a fun time with good friends. It was a fun time with good music. So I hope if anybody can take a little bit of something out of it and that can put a smile on their face, then it was all then it was my pleasure to be able to do this with you guys today.
Thank you so much. We appreciate
Definitely.
it.
You
All
definitely
right, great. My
accomplished
pleasure.
that. Thank you so much, Brian.
Bye now.
Thank you, Brian. You certainly did put a smile on our faces. We hope you all enjoyed Brian's memories. What a treat to learn more about that era of the Rollers that maybe isn't all that known or talked about. We've really enjoyed talking to him. We especially loved hearing from an industry person what consummate and professional musicians the Rollers were. We never doubted it, did we? Well, friends, thank you all for listening, and as always, keep on rolling.